The Rebel Capitalist Show.
So now I've got the table of contents here for the book. So the first thing that looks really interesting is defining, well, newbie struggles, because I guess that applies to the majority of the people listening right now. So, and I know that, and this is so cliche, but it's very true that you're your own worst enemy. And the reason most people fail, from what I've seen, is because they never try. They just sit there and think about doing it over and over and over again. The next thing you know, it's 5 years later or 10 years later, and then it's kind of too late. And I was talking to Patrick Bet David the other day on an interview, and we were talking about how you've at some point you've just got to go out and do it, no matter how bad you think you're going to suck. You are. I mean, look at my first YouTube videos; they're horrible. But I didn't sit there and plan for days and weeks and hours. I just sit there and thought, okay, I need to do a YouTube channel. How do I do it? Bang, hit the record. Let's do it over and over and over again. Let's throw everything up against the wall. Let's try different edits. Let's see what sticks. Let's listen to the audience and then just iterate as we go. And the next thing you know, 9 months later, you've got 100,000 subscribers, where 9 months later, most people would still be thinking about how to make it perfect without even starting, right?
Yeah, I think everything you're saying. So Patrick Bet David, the people that watch you, that his stuff, your stuff, or even my stuff, largely what we're doing when we're teaching is we're trying to rewire people's thinking. We're trying to reprogram, because the way we've been programmed for the first 0 to 18 years old or so, it's just like, oh, you're taught to not fail. You're conditioned to not fail, when actually failure is a prerequisite to success. And so that's why, it's like, okay, why are you doing a book, Eric? Like, nobody reads books anymore. Like, Pomp told me that, right? Because nobody reads books anymore. So we're talking about on this podcast. And I was like, look, at the end of the day, you only write a book if you have a message. And I think, for me at least, I think we all have a goal of hitting our target audience, but there's over 3 billion people in the world that have played games, and they need to understand that they can make an impact on the world, right? It doesn't matter if you play duck hunt or sports. Sports counts too. Sports is a game. But my point here is, if you look at it, something that's practical is, look at the longest term investors out there. Let's look at a Charlie Munger or Warren Buffett. Look at how they think. And largely how they think is just buy and hold for the most part, right? And I'm not telling everyone to do that, but when I look at everything that I've done, it's the things that I've stuck with, kind of to your point, the YouTube channel. If I look at my podcast, if I gave up in the first 2 years, we wouldn't have Leveling Up. We wouldn't have Marketing School, which now combined, they're at about 50 million downloads so far. And I'm not saying it's the biggest podcast. I'm just saying it takes time to compound. So, I mean, that's largely what you talk about with your audience. And it's the same thing here. Whatever you decide to do in life or business, it's just, how are you going to compound over time? And are you enjoying the journey?
Yeah. And you've got to not worry about making a fool of yourself. You've got to not worry about failing. You've got to not worry about perfection. Perfection, number one, you'll never achieve it, but you only get better by doing. It's very tough to get better just by thinking things through and whiteboarding them. There's a really great YouTuber I like a lot. Think Media is
Sean
Sean
Cannell.
Cannell, I believe is his name. And he's got a lot of these great one-liners. And he says, listen, at a certain point, you've got to punch perfect in the face. And what he means by that is exactly what we're saying. So many people get the paralysis of analysis and they just never start. And but it's the exact same thing everywhere. And in real estate investing, as an example, when I first got into that in 2012, I would go to some of these local events, was it the REI Club or something like that. And man, so many people, like 90% of the people in there had never bought a property. And I'm like, well, how long have you been thinking about getting in real estate? Oh, well, probably 3 or 4 years now. But I've got my LLC set up. I've got my bank account set up. I've got my accountant set up. I've got all these things. Dude, pull the trigger, man. You got to shoot first and ask questions later. Where someone like me, and I think I had a huge edge from being an entrepreneur so long. I'm like, okay, just give me the basics. Let me take, 100,000. Let me take some money, buy a house. Let me do it, and then I'll figure things out as I go. And I'll have a lot more knowledge a lot faster. Have you had that same type of experience, or how do you make yourself just get off the couch and take action when you're concerned that you're not ready yet?
You know, this comes back to thinking. And so, I think one thing is, I think either blackjack or poker should be prerequisites at school because it
Yeah,
teaches you risk taking, you know, bankroll management and all that. It teaches you long term stuff, right?
yeah.
I have a weird thing, and I don't know, this can apply to everyone, but my childhood, you know, sometimes Asian parents are really, you have a tiger. It's known as a tiger mom, which it's a constant beat down the whole time, right? It's never good enough, right? And so I learned at a younger age, and poker was really painful too. So I learned to reframe the pain into like, oh, this is fuel, like give me more. And
Uh,
so that now I will kind of jump into things like, oh yeah, it's going to be really painful in the beginning, but that's a prerequisite. Give me more, and then I use it to motivate myself. So it's kind of some sick reframing I've done in my head. I'm not saying it'll work for everyone, but again, this ties back to thinking. A lot of stuff in life is just like, oh, okay, let's reframe failure into, oh, it's a prerequisite to success. Let's reframe this whole pain thing into fuel, right? And if you keep reframing all these things, then you have an edge over everyone else. And to your point, you just mentioned an edge as an entrepreneur. It's because you've been rewired from all the kind of bad habits we learned, the bad the bad programming we had growing up. So
I think that's a great point. I've never really thought about it too, because for me, my first instinct is just to do it. Like my first instinct isn't to sit back and try to perfect it and think about it. But I think that's because I was in the entrepreneur game for, 15 years, just doing it
and
over and
blackjack.
over and over and over again. So you just at a certain point it becomes second nature.
We're conditioned. So the thing is, entrepreneur, that's one thing. And you're also conditioned for risk with blackjack as well as I'm conditioned for risk with poker. So
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's keep going, man. So, how important, or explain defining your mission? I mean, we're talking about just getting off the couch and doing it, but I guess you do have to have the light at the
yeah.
end of the tunnel and you have to kind of have a game plan.
Yeah. So before I answer that one, I just want to caveat this. Towards the end of the book, there's a concept of the wealth ladder. And this is from the CEO of a company called ConvertKit. And at the very bottom rung of the ladder is where you're getting educated, you're learning. And then you go up, you're trying to build great habits around kind of what you do. And then eventually you get a job, a full-time job. That's kind of the career ladder, right? During that, you can decide to start a side hustle. So you can build on top of that while you have some safety. Then you can decide to go build an agency or a service business, or you can build a drop shipping business and then you can have some success, decide to hold some inventory. And then you can go build products, right? Then you could go build a network effects business, right? Then you could go start investing in things. And so there's levels to everything. And the whole idea here is that you don't have to play at the highest level if you don't want to. That's fine. But if you want to get to the next level, you have to beat the current one or else you don't deserve to get to the next one. And so I think people try to skip, and people like all the stuff we're seeing in society right now, like people complaining and things like that. It's just because they haven't beaten the current level. And right now, you see maybe there's people like, oh, I want to try to break the system or something like that, right? Anyway, politics aside, so I think I think your question was more around how can they?
Their mission,
Okay, got it.
they got to have a game plan.
Yeah,
I don't want to say a game plan because it makes it sound too structured.
I
I
got
think
it. So,
you just got to have an end objective.
yep,
So every morning when you wake up, you've got, okay, I need to do this, this, and this
yeah,
to get me one step closer to
yep,
where I want to be. I
yep,
don't like too much structure there because I don't
yep,
like a 3 or 5 year goal because it needs to be fluid. But
yep.
but how important is that, and how would you suggest someone set that up for themselves to get that further motivation?
So there's a lot of nuances to this answer, but for me at least, what worked for me, your mileage may vary, is I didn't really start to define my mission until maybe 2-3 years ago. I didn't start to realize, oh, what this book is actually about. And by
Mm,
the way, the book took me 5-6 years to write, right? They're like, what they tell you is like, oh yeah, it takes 5 to 6 years. It actually took me that amount of time,
yeah.
but on and off. So my what really sparked kind of how I thought to think about the mission differently was the guy I have in the book for the Ford, Howard Marks. He founded a company called Activision, and he also founded a company called Acclaim. These are big gaming companies,
Mm.
and now he's got a company called Start Engine. His mission is to help entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. And I'm like, when I heard that, I was like, that's so broad. Like, why would you have a mission so broad? And then when you actually think about it, not Zappos, Google's mission is to organize the world's information, right? Facebook is to connect the world. And so these are missions that they'll probably never be accomplished. These are ongoing. It's going to be ongoing work to get there. And so when Howard Marks mentioned it, he was speaking at my conference. He was like, look, That's what a mission is all about. It's not supposed to be achievable. So you can wake up every single day working towards it, right? Getting a little closer every single day and doing what you can. And then you can hand the mission off to somebody else. So broadly speaking, my mission is to level up the world, right? And I will never accomplish that. I just love learning and I love teaching. But I think if you're in your teens or you're in your 20s, I think there's still a lot of learning to figure out. There's a lot of learning to figure out who you are, what you want long term, and then you can define that overarching mission, right? You can have the overarching mission. You can have a 10 to 25-year BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. You can have a 3 to 5 year plan. Then you can have a 1 year plan. Then you can have a quarterly plan, right? There's a lot of plans. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. For me, I just have kind of an overarching objective. This something that just kind of motivates me.
what is it?
Then I just every day I just try to make sure that I'm doing something that gets me closer to that goal. So if I find myself with like an hour or two to blow during the day after lunch or something, I'm like, okay, what can I do to get me just incrementally closer, even if it's 1 centimeter closer to achieving that overarching objective. But I don't try to do the 3 or 5 year thing, because every point in my life, I've found that if I look back, or if I went back 3 years ago and told myself that I'd be doing what I'm doing today, the 3 years ago me would have never believed it. Like if you went back in 2018 and said, "Oh, George, in 2020 or 2021, you're going to be in Phoenix, you're going to be doing this YouTube channel that has 170,000 subscribers, you're going to be blah, blah, blah." I said, "You're absolutely crazy." But if you go back to 2015, I would have said the exact same thing about 2018. And so I try not to get too fixated with the goals there.
I'll tell you what. I mean, one more thing I'll add to this real quick is there's this concept of the vivid vision, and it's written by this guy named Cameron Harold.
Yeah.
And that is basically a 3 year plan. And I wrote mine 3 years ago, and it actually ends in 2021. And we've had some things happen in the world, but largely everything has been accomplished. And it's not like I think about it every day, but I think because I wrote it and the team saw it, that we kind of just continue to move in that direction. So I don't know, maybe it's unconsciously in the back of my mind, but it did take me a couple of days to finish that. So